I'm Sir Flowbojan Thunderhammer.
And I'm Teflon Frosthammer.
And I'm Cabbage Tidehammer.
And this
is
WAK.
Just a second.
If Amtgard knighthood means anything, you can't knife a motherfucker and keep it.
And the thing that people need to understand essentially about arts and sciences events is that your scores don't matter.
Do you want a black phoenix or a white phoenix?
Jeez, language, man. We're on a
right.
freaking podcast, for
You guys
fuck's
ready?
sake.
Yeah.
Mind-blowing experience, right?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to WAK, where we discuss topics important to the Amtgard community at large and talk with interesting people from around the foam fighting world. This week we have one that we've been wanting to get to for a very long time. Thank you so much, our guests from Darkon, for joining us. I want to start off a little non-traditionally since we have several guests. Could you please introduce yourselves? I haven't had enough caffeine today. And then tell us a little bit about Darkon.
We can start with Aaron.
Hey, good evening. My name is Aaron Nab. I am Fyxe Firebrand in the LARP community. I started out in Darkon back in 2003. I've also played a lot of other LARP organizations, as well as Dagger here, Amtgard, Belagarth.
Okay.
I'm a knight currently in Darkon as of 2013. I'm with a company. Their company is in Amtgard. I'm with a company called No Quarter in Darkon. We call them countries. And that's a little bit about myself.
Cool.
Why don't we go to, it looks like it says Fyxe. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
That's all good. That's Fyxe.
Darn it.
I'm glad we got that on here.
Yeah, no worries. My name is Yanje Castellanos, better known as Fyxe Firebrand. And I got my start in LARP in Dagger here sometime, I think, in 2011 or so. And I've been playing Darkon probably since 2013. I'm a knight of Darkon as well, and I avidly cross-game into Amtgard.
Oh, wow.
I do it all. I love the WAKs. I love them for different reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And then last but not least, we have in the Zoom call, Brady, I believe.
Hi there. I'm Brady Reichert. In-game, I'm Radby Bardheart. I got started with Darkon in 2015, and since then I've gone on to become an admin of the club, so I'm the current president. And I'm also a new Amtgarder. I just started just right before the pandemic hit, but I also look forward to learning more about Amtgard and my journeys as well.
That's fantastic. Thanks, everybody. So right off the bat, our goal here is to kind of discuss Darkon and introduce it to Amtgarders who, we're familiar with LARPs that are kind of close to us. So things like Dagger here, Belagarth, those are all very familiar to Amtgarders in general. SCA as well, just because it's like, it's almost universally known among people who LARP. Darkon is one of those that we hear about, we've talked about on the show in passing before, but we don't really know a lot about it, and there's not anybody in our local community, at least, who plays. So we're trying to sort of bridge that gap and talk about them both. Just off the bat, there was one thing that was said amongst, I think, by a couple of you. You have a knighthood in your game. Can you talk to us about how that works, how it's achieved, and what it means for Darkon?
Yeah, definitely. I think I'll start out a bit just, what is Darkon and how it compares, towards Amtgard or some of the other LARP communities.
Sure, yeah.
Darkon is, has a long history. It's been around since the late 70s, early 80s, coming about from a community called Amarthengarth. Around the same time Dagger here was formed. Darkon is a wargaming LARP community. It is a full contact community, so you can it kind of bridges the gap between, say, Dagger here, where it's a full contact fighting all the time style of LARP, versus Amtgard, which has different like militia battles versus battle games, ditches, etc. Darkon has magic like Amtgard does in battle games. And so it kind of bridges the gap between the two of a full contact fighting community alongside classes and magic that the Amtgard battle games provide, and does a lot with adventures. We do camping style adventures where it's an entire weekend of fun fighting monsters, grouping up together with your favorite small groups, large groups. We do large large scale battle games. So talking on the realm of like 50 to 60 people per side, an average battle day. And some of our large battle events throughout the year, we can see up to 200 to 300 people.
Oh, wow. How frequently does that happen? Like, how frequently do you do events where this type of thing is going to take place?
So our events are bi-weekly, so every other weekend on a Sunday here in the Maryland, DC area. And then our large scale events, like our camping style events, we usually have 5 to 6 per year. Oh, wow. With one of them being our largest event of the year, which actually just happened last month, called Bella Maternus. Nice. We had our 9th annual Bella Maternus as of last month, and that is a 4-day event essentially. Oh wow! Starting Wednesday night into Sunday morning.
Nice.
That's super cool.
Yeah. So I heard a few things in there that I wanted to ask you about before we move on. From an outside perspective, in Amtgard we have battle games and we do have monsters for our questing, but at least at the parks around here, that is very rarely done on a local park level. Usually things like that are only used when you go to one of the 4 big kingdom events a year.
Also like adventures as the name of it rather than just an event.
Yeah, right. So it sounds like that you have quite a bit more of that worked into your weekly meetings. Did I understand that correctly?
To some extent, some events that we have, you can see a lot of 2-team style events where we're just pairing people on one side of the field and going at it, and just a battle game style, or I guess would be closer to like more ditch style, but having.
But we keep the spells.
We keep all there's all the rules are in effect at all times in our game. We do, and then as more people volunteer to help run adventure style events as more getting into it.
Right.
So it is a volunteer based game. And so the more people we have volunteer, obviously the more effort we can put into doing some of those adventures, which is really awesome.
Yeah, we get that one.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Brady. Sorry.
I was going to say something that is interesting that we have a land map that actually encourages politics and engagements between different countries in our game. So at the start of our events, basically there are hexes that different countries have on a map. And at the start of the events, we have these things called land actions where folks can encounter different monsters or attempt to take territories that are held by other countries. So it also encourages like a lot of politicking and relationships, alliances, really helps to coat some RP paint onto each one of our gatherings that we have. So it really gives that why folks are fighting and gives that purpose to a lot of our gatherings.
So this is something I've seen referenced before. It's that hex grid. You said there were 20 countries? I didn't hear the exact number.
No, I'd say right now we're about at 9 active countries at the moment.
And so roughly how big are those? I assume they span across the U.S., so a couple of states per country, roughly?
I think you're kind of...
Darkon is local.
Fyxe probably is a better one.
Yeah, no, so Darkon is currently local to like the Maryland, Virginia, DC kind of area.
Okay, this is what I was gonna. Yeah, okay, I didn't know the scope of it. Okay.
So we do have Darkon chapters that do span, nationally. There's several across the nation. All 3 of us are from the Darkon in Maryland, Virginia, DC area, right. Known as Darkon Crownlands. And there's a couple other chapters that are in agreement with us as far as utilizing our rule set and keeping in touch with us.
So this is really cool. So the other question I had, just having seen this map referenced before, is you said it for every adventure or for every big event it resets, or is this a thing that continues throughout the year? How is this map? Is it a constantly running thing that morphs over time? How does it work?
Yeah, so the land map is a perpetual map essentially. That's really cool. You can have several countries essentially start with so many hexes of land. I think the current rules state 13 hexes of land, and there are many things that you can do. from developing cities or mines within your land map, as well as taking over other lands nearby, which are generally neutral and could be infested with monsters, where you go on essentially a monster hunting event. And a lot of that is the rule sets are based on dice rolls, and certain classes have some abilities that can alter the outcomes of those rolls, either easier or harder. And then you also have then you can also get into wars with other countries, where if your borders are coming up to another country, or you're nearby another country on the land map and you want some of their land, you could essentially go to war with them to take over.
So I want to kind of double dip onto this a little bit. You said countries, and just to make sure that the Amtgard audience understands, when you're meaning countries, for us, it's kind of like fighting companies, right?
It's a fighting company.
Okay,
so
cool.
It's essentially fighting companies. Darkon has from what I understand, Darkon has a little bit more, influence from the country/company standpoint, in the sense of the land map itself, formulates countries' influence. But also our rule sets, the way that we vote on rules is based on countries. A country provides 2 senators to our democratic rule changes.
Oh, that's really cool.
Okay, so it's not like the bigger company always wins. There's equal representation. Okay, I like that.
Yeah,
That's cool.
it's a democracy.
And
I want to make a republic, but sure.
I want to make sure
Kai.
that I understand something too, because I think this is a very unique part of your game. If all of us were in a company and we were looking to expand our lands, then we say, okay, we're choosing this hex over here, and we roll, and I come back and I say, well, sire, this is currently infested with orcs. And so we know ahead of time what we'd be getting into if we chose to go and assault this hypothetical neutral providence that we would be going into, and could kind of base whether we want to do it now, or maybe that's worth holding off and trying for an easier target later.
Yeah, so there's a couple different rules that are stated within that hypothetical scenario.
Okay.
One of those is we have a class called the Ranger class, which is, anybody in any sort of fantasy setting would understand, what a ranger is out to do. And he has the capability to somewhat influence the randomized rolls that are going to happen on that hex, but also come to understand, that forethought of get the intel about that land. You could get intel about perhaps what resources are on that land, as well as the type of monsters that are there. And that could influence the amount of players you might take to help out with that. Because you could hire out to other countries, as well as you might take specific classes to help you with those monsters.
So I guess some of our confusion might be from not understanding how the setup of the event actually runs, right? So we understand how the map sort of works, but you mentioned something that piques my interest quite a bit about sending a number of players. So do you have some of the lightest touch LARPs have the mod team, right, who runs all of the encounters and things like that, and so sometimes you'll have multiple mods going on at the same time. Are you running multiple hexes at the same time then, when you're doing hex moves or whatever?
Yeah, so we generally run them fairly quickly. We have somebody at the event they're called the Land Marshal, and it would be represented by a mod person or mod team. And they have volunteers that help them run as monsters of the group. And what's done is all of these roles and things that are happening have through the check-in period to get ready, essentially, for their actions. So we start at noon and go through 1 p.m. for check-in. By the end of 1 p.m., your country has to essentially get an idea of what they want to do. They talk to the land marshal and they get it all set up. And then at 1 p.m., all those events take place. Usually takes between 30 minutes to an hour to get through everything.
Oh, wow.
And then our regular day event starts after that.
Oh, that's really
cool. That would be kind of the flow of it.
Absolutely. Well said, Kai.
And what's great is a lot of people that participate in those events as part of a country action. So their people are actually going to fight the monsters. Will then volunteer to be the monsters for the next group of people.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got a rotating fought, now we get to be monsters. Okay. So I guess my question following up on this is, is it solely, is the stuff at your events and your bigger battles, is it solely focused around these land actions, or is there a community thing that you're all going towards as well? Or is it solely based on I guess property battles or land battles?
Could I take a stab at this one?
Absolutely. Yeah,
please. I think so. Something that that's nice about Darkon is we have a lot of folks that cross game, and we see what are really great things in other communities. And we're trying to create a game. I think particularly within the last 5 years, that is more inclusive, to creating spaces for different types of players, and also figuring out how to better recognize people within our game, recognize that we also have a player base with changing needs.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at what can we do to create family camping for our large Bellum event in the future. So that's going to be something we're excited to roll out at our next Bellum. We're really trying to work on our arts and sciences. And we've even introduced a class to our game that is a non-combat class. So it's an artisan. So it's kind of like a craftsmanship class. So it's us trying to also work towards building a stronger arts and sciences. So really focusing on flourishing those communities. We also, with my first visit to Amtgard, I was very impressed with what I saw about how they celebrated their nights and how detailed they were with their approach to arts and sciences. So we're trying to find better ways that we recognize people in our game. And both Fyxe and Kai have been incredibly instrumental into elevating what it means to be a knight in our game and to recognize players in our game. So they're two wonderful folks for that.
That's awesome. So you mentioned, arts and sciences and sort of boosting that in your game. Do you have currently an award structure? Because Amtgard has a structure where we can earn. Okay. It's kind of controversial. Some people love it. Some people hate it. How does the award structure in your game work? Do you have different categories for like cloth and metal and leather? Like, how does that work?
It's pretty much just as you said. We're developing different categories. We're still fine tuning things. We've always we've had an arts and sciences kind of tournament annually every year, but it's never really given the attention to make it like something that's a consistent part of the game. So we're trying to look at how do we recognize those folks a bit more, and understanding that a huge part of our game is that people invest points into a class. We've seen that as a way in our culture that kind of works for doing these things. So we're creating this artisan type class that has a huge role in kind of making in-game items, but also they can kind of level up that character in special ways, earn special ranks by their participation in arts and science competitions.
Yeah, so this is really interesting to me. A non-combat class sounds really cool. Let's use one of your weekend events again. What does the artisan do physically at the event? Are they handing out cool weapons? Are they maybe improving the weapons that people are using? Or what abilities do they have to impact the game, both in person and then I guess in the maybe non-personal part of your game?
Sure. So I would think of them a lot as a support class.
Okay.
As we so in our game, like our characters can wear different types of armor and things that can get damaged. They can visit these characters. Maybe you have an artisan that is kind of playing a more blacksmith type character. They can go about repairing armor, or perhaps they can go about creating a spell, potion type thing that can get someone healed. Or maybe one of our rogue classes is looking for a poison. They can go to that class and try to get something of that nature from them.
Huh.
Yeah, I think one of the things this class is fairly new to Darkon, as we're kind of identifying the best needs for our players that can't take the field or want to play a more non-combat class.
Right.
But we do have a class that I feel like bridges that gap a little bit as well. That has been great in the past. Our Bard class is another support style class that it is a fighting class, and can utilize weapons similar to a rogue. However, they can give out essentially we use belt favors to symbolize magic enhancements that are given out to people.
Okay.
And so they can give a number of belt favors out that can do things like all weapons that these players hold can strike as if they're magic weapons, or all players. We have a system called giants in our game with like monsters that are very large, like dragons or ettins and things like that, where these players can stand against these monsters and don't have to fight on their knees, essentially.
Right.
So would the belt favors that we see in the background here be an example of some of the
that gold one that you see is actually a bardic favor.
Nice.
But those are just different things from wonderful units I've got to hang out with and do things with in the past. But yes, the gold one is a bardic favor. That is correct.
This
I
is
like
really
that
cool.
red one, buddy.
Crimson Queen.
Thanks, bud.
So this is really cool to me. Just the idea of a class that does this. We've had something similar in Amtgard. It's not a class, but like we've had events where you can purchase a potion to do something on the field, or your team might be able to unlock a flame blade, which is a relic weapon that has a special effect. But a class that actually provides that seems way cooler and a cool way to involve non-coms. Has Amtgard? I'm asking Teflon because he's at least worked with our rules reps. Have we ever considered something like that?
Yes, I don't know how far that's supposed to go, but there is some ideas working currently.
I like that. I mean, as a concept for players who don't want to fight, maybe I love that as an idea.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so Darkon are before this class came about has, as part of their integral rules, has things like potions and scrolls and relic weapons already built into the rules, which has been great. Things like classes like wizards previously could make X number of potions or scrolls at the beginning of an adventure day, and it would come at a cost of coins and spell power throughout the day. And then also we have special relic weapons that have been around for years, where they were special. They're weapons that are Darkon owned, and then they would take the field with the players, and the players could utilize them. And if they slayed a player that had that relic weapon, they could then loot the weapon from them. And each one of those weapons had special powers. For instance, an example would be Javelin of Lightning. Whenever the javelin was thrown, not only does it do damage as if it was a normal thrown weapon, but also does damage as if it was a lightning bolt, which can also destroy shields if it strikes a shield.
So it occurs to me there might be a difference in combat systems. In Amtgard, we have a very a location-based system. If I hit Teflon's arm, he loses that arm unless he has armor or some special enchantment. In your system, it sounds like there may be something different, or how does that work?
So it's extremely similar into location-based. All the locations are the same as they were in Amtgard, with some slight variations. Very slight in the sense of, like, for instance, Amtgard, if you get hit in the butt, it's considered your torso. In Darkon, it's considered your leg, depending on which butt cheek you get hit in.
Well, depending on which tournament you're watching, it also counts as a leg in Amtgard. So.
No. Don't know nothing about that.
I didn't know it was that kind of discussion.
Here. Let me throw a little shade real quick.
Yeah?
So you guys have, I think, colored weapon classes as well, unless I'm super dated on what I've read. Can you go over that real fast?
Absolutely. The colored weapon classes, they follow a 1 point or 2 point system. However, the colors designate the type of damage that's being swung on another player, because we do differentiate between, essentially, the biggest difference would be clubs versus swords. So in Amtgard, you have the omnibats or clubs.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
In Darkon, we differentiate flat blades versus the round. So the difference. So there you would have, like, for instance, yellow is blunt weapon damage. So clubs, hammers, maces, flails, morning stars, etc.
So
swords.
An Amtgarder who comes over to play with you guys would be using a yellow weapon almost certainly by default.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, if they're using a round sword, yeah.
Yeah.
And before you continue on with the rest of it, do those damage types incur penalties or bonuses depending on what you're fighting? So if you were going up against a skeleton, for example, would your bludgeoning weapon do more damage than, say, a a rapier, a piercing weapon only would.
Yeah. So in this case, skeletons are immune to like thrust damage, so that would be our red
Exactly.
spears,
Yeah.
daggers, etc.
Okay.
In some cases, monsters do incur, weaknesses to some weapons. A lot of that's closer to like a magical or we have a class called holy, weapon class, not a character class, but then we also, and so they like undead monsters are weaker to like holy weapons. So yeah. So yes,
That's really
the answer to your question is yes.
Yeah, so sorry for interrupting you. But that was I felt like I knew where you were going there.
You already saw it.
Old school, 2.0 D&D player here.
So if you're thinking like OG, D&D edition 1, edition 2, that's a lot of where our rules originally came from.
Nice.
So you'll see a lot of remnants of that in some of our character classes. Like the cleric isn't allowed to use bladed weapons for the most part, things like that. Speaking of, like, our bladed weapons are like one-handed bladed weapons are our white weapons. That's the color class it is. And then our two-handed weapons are cleaving, like axes and greatswords and polearms are considered black weapons, which the easiest way to think about it is they swing as if they do 2 points of damage instead of 1. So if you have 2 hands on it, it deals 2 points. It's as if getting hit by 2 swords at once.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I like that.
Pretty simple. Then we also have a class called red, which is our thrusting weapon. So any swords that are stabbing, or spears, or daggers, and things like that. Arrows, javelins.
Do you use like Dagon things have the electrical tape on the bottom of the pommels to designate if things are legal? Do you guys kind of do that thing too?
Similar.
Yeah, we do that for easy recognition of the type of weapon, and then players are suggested to call their colors when swinging.
Awesome. Okay.
I've seen footage of Darkon before, and I see people yelling a color when they throw. I assumed it was similar to Dag, like this weapon has a certain effect.
Exactly.
You mentioned with the bludgeoning slashing, is there more to it than just potential weakness to monsters and things, or is there? Okay.
Yeah. So against players, there's a large weakness to blunt weapons or yellow weapons, in that you can't slay another player to a limb. For instance, in Amtgard, if you get hit twice to your arm, you're dead. And in Darkon, if you get hit twice with a yellow weapon, you are still alive with your arm wounded. So essentially, you break somebody's arm, but you can't kill them to it. You can, in Darkon, lose more than 2 limbs at a time. So
there's no two-limb death.
There's no 2-limb death in
SCA's
Darkon.
like that too.
And in Darkon, we also have a state of being that is between wounded and dead, which is called mortally wounded, where you cannot continue to fight, but you can be healed a lot easier. Where you can still yell for help and move on the ground and crawl as if we're quote unquote mortally wounded.
So borderline your death saves as a D&D character.
Essentially, yeah. So you're dying, and if you're not tended to within 5 minutes at an adventure, then you become dead.
5 minutes. Wow. So okay, immediately as an Amtgard person, what stands out to me is the pace of the game, because at 5 minutes in Amtgard, we would just go, okay, I'm dead. I'm gonna go back to my base and get a drink and come back out.
Real talk. It often plays out that way. Most people aren't that patient. But the rules is written 5 minutes.
Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, some of our it comes down to the adventure team at the actual adventure and how they want to deal with character death and things like that. But as our rules have a default, we have a place called Hades where dead players go back to, and it's generally roughly about 12 minutes that players are asked to stay dead.
We call that Texas in Amtgard.
Yeah. And for the most part, the adventure team speeds that up because we do want to. Everybody wants to come out. They want to have fun. They want to swing sticks with their friend.
Yeah, I had actually glanced over the rules. I don't know, probably 4 or 5 months ago. And I noticed that all of the times are I'm going to use archaic for Amtgard terms, because they are longer than even version 6 for those who have been around for that time frames. Yeah, I know, right? We had the 5-minute deaths, whereas they had the 5-minute mortally wounded and the 12-minute full-on deaths, I think it was, and things like that. So the pacing is interesting because reading the rule book looks like it's a very slow-paced game, but it doesn't actually seem that way, even in the dreaded documentary thing that happened.
So I think our rules as written haven't quite adopted the culture of the play style.
That's interesting.
At least in this area, right? I would say that the pacing of the game is closer to closer to 1 to 2 minutes, and maybe 4 minutes for death or something close to that average. So I would say 25% of what it is now.
Sure.
If I'm being honest, I think the rules that you are discussing, I feel like those times are more representative of camp out times.
It may be, yeah.
Exactly. So if I'm being honest, where there's one long adventure going on throughout the day with different quests, and at some point you might end up in Hades and you wait there to get your res. But other than that, like at a day battle, you don't have those wait times. It just isn't feasible.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay, that makes it interesting because
those are for adventures.
Yeah, you have basically like the local park time frames versus the event weekend time frames, which is really interesting too.
Well, in old game Amtgard, we would do something similar where the death timer was always 5 minutes, but if everybody was getting bored, a Reeve would go, do we just want to advance the time 5 minutes? And everybody would go, yeah, and then we would jump back out onto the field.
Or just do half counts for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but there's a thing that happened in Amtgard with V8, where we took lives completely out of the equation.
That was my next question.
Yeah, we're in the drift. So in Amtgard, your class would determine the number of lives you had. And if you sucked like me, you played a warrior because you got more lives than anybody else. But when you ran out of lives, you were done for the entire event.
Well, it was that game. Right?
Yeah, for that battle game, and some events would have just a static, whatever. And when we took that out, the pace of our game sped up a lot, but it made a death very cheap. That's why I said, you might get hit by an entangle ball, which says you can't move for 60 seconds, and people will just go, I don't care, I'm dead. And they'll walk off the field. So does your game have a life mechanic like that, where you have a fixed number, say 5, 10, whatever lives for the weekend or whatever?
No, our rules don't have a life count for as part of any classes or part of the rules in the game. Every once in a while we'll play a battle game that denotes the number of lives. Usually it's a team life count versus the other team's life count, not a personal player.
Yeah, like a
count.
shared pool of 100 lives for the team.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Go ahead.
No, the only thing I was going to say to your entangle thing, I think that at least culturally, it's kind of looked down upon or frowned upon if you kind of just shrug off a magical ability. If you get hit with a frozen ball, if you get hit with an entangle, at least locally, I find that most of the time you might be begrudging, but you wait for a dispel, you wait for someone to actually kill you.
Yeah.
Typically.
Amtgard, it's very much more of I get hit with entangle and I look around and very quickly decide what would be the best strategic approach for this. And then if the best approach is for me to die, then I just die, which I don't.
I would rather die. I would rather die personally. I want to get back to fighting. I feel you. It's just.
Well, there's also, I think, in some of those rules don't change when we play like battle games. For instance, if we're playing a game where it's instant, you can instantly tap a res point, that's 30 feet away. Mm-hmm. And somebody hits you with an ice ball, and the rules state you have to stand there for 5 minutes. I think it kind of gets away from what the battle, like that specific battle game's intent is.
Agreed.
Yeah, somebody with a lot of ice balls could maybe ruin the day.
Yeah, I feel like you can grief a player or multiple, and so I think that those times are more, again, back to the adventure base where you're playing an all-day adventure versus a battle game that's lasting 20 minutes.
Go ahead.
I was just going to finish up my what I was saying there by saying I like that it has meaning. I love that it has meaning in your game, and that there's consequences for the things that are going on, because oftentimes in Amtgard I feel like there aren't necessarily consequences for the things that happen in the battle game.
And so I'll add to some of the, we talked a lot about death and going back to Hades when you die. There are mechanics for players to be resurrected past death. As long as players stay where they are when they die. There are character classes that can cast spells like resurrection to bring them back to life, and things like that as well. There's also spells that can prevent people from being resurrected. For instance, we have a last right spell that sends them straight to Hades. So
I love that.
There's some interesting politics around all that stuff too.
I used to
Really?
lay there and stare at our healers seductively, waiting for them to
just on his side with one leg cocked up. Yeah, it was upsetting. So actually, Amtgard shares some of that. We do have a cursed state where when you're dead, you can, and stay down. And if you are a barbarian, and there's a few other ways you can make it happen, that person can't be resurrected. So we're familiar with that. Flo, you had a finger up.
Oh, I was agreeing
Reading?
with you. I was pointing over you two, going, yeah,
Okay.
that thing you said.
What I wanted to get into, somebody mentioned earlier spell points or spell power. So how does magic work in your game? Because for us, I'm a bard. I have, it's very D&D where I have like 30 points I can spend, and this is level 1, level 2, level 3. They all have different costs. How does that work in your game?
Yeah, so our character classes they have levels, or we call them ranks. And every 5 credits you get, your level goes up by 1. And we don't have a max
cap. Oh, you don't. Okay.
There's no maximum level. However, classes do have a rank in which they're not going to get any more abilities, essentially. So you could quote unquote say there's a level a level cap, but it's a soft cap, essentially. It later becomes kind of bragging rights, essentially. And you get a credit for every event that you attend. That's a day event, and then you get 3 for attending a camp out adventure. And then there are some other ways you volunteer to the game to gain additional credits and things like that as well.
Nice.
And so at every level, each class gets a set number of abilities. There's no picking of abilities for a specific class. You get all of the class's abilities.
Oh, interesting.
And use it as many times as you want throughout the day. There used to be a cap, but they went away with it, and I think it was a great decision for our game personally.
Oh, interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, several years ago, we went from having a character classes having X number of spell points based on their character class level, and went to a system where you get all of the abilities for the character class, and you can use them as often as you want. Now, magic in our game is, I would say, quite a bit different from Amtgard. In Amtgard, you're going to get a set. In Amtgard, from what I understand, you get a set, phrase that you're going to say X number of times in order to cast a spell.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And it's generally fairly quick. It can when you compare it to something like Darkon. In Darkon, you can create what we'll call create our own spells, in the sense of the verbal that you're going to speak is your own. It's your own unique. You can create a poem. You can speak it in a different language. You can. It's all based on number of syllables that has to be said in order to complete a spell. For instance, a spell might have X number of syllables, and when you finish those number of syllables, then you say the incantation line of the spell, and then you cast the spell.
Oh, cool.
An example would be a very popular spell is Fireball, which mages can cast. I believe it's 300 syllables.
Holy cow.
Without reduction. That's
without any spell
base
reductions.
level the first day you get it.
Okay.
And so the way magic is meant to be slower but more powerful, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So in our game Fireball, at that high number of syllables, you throw a red spell ball at a player or the ground, and any player within 3 feet of where it touches is dead.
Okay.
I like this.
Boom. It's like a grenade, essentially.
There are no verbal offensive spells. It's not pointing. There's spell ball representations of our spells.
So any offensive spell must have a physical representation.
You have to actually throw it. I think that's
that makes sense.
I like that.
I think that's neat personally. Y'all verbals confuse me. I'm trying to learn.
I play a bard, which is only verbals, and it's so much based on distances and pointing and yelling things at
Y'all
people.
keep shoving me. Why?
It's funny.
I just want to fight you.
It's just funny.
I hate it.
We run into situations too where having offensive verbal magic can cause some slowdown of play, because people say, "Oh, I was out of range." No, you weren't. Let's call a Reeve over here or something. Whereas it's really easy to say, "Well, a spell ball hit right there."
Yeah, for me, I'm using a short sword, which is 3 feet. Cool.
You would be surprised.
I was going to ask, because your culture with the ice balls or something like that was to just take them. So I was curious if the quibble over distance is a big thing or not.
Sometimes, I would say it's less from my experience in Amtgard.
Stake, right?
From my experience at Amtgard, it's less arguing. We kind of have this rule of, wherever the fireball, all of our AoE spells are 3 feet. And so it's just basically considered somebody's wingspan. You just stick out your arm. It's about 3 feet. So if you personally get hit by, if you personally get hit by the fireball, you reach out and see who you can touch and say you're dead too.
If I'm being honest, there's also a pretty good culture of like your homies will be like, "Hey, buddy, you actually got hit," and we're pretty good about that.
Yeah.
And then a little bit more into spells, as we have defensive spells, and we also have more healing spells. So like a lot of our defensive spells are represented by either a headband or a belt favor. We talked earlier about like the bard belt favors. The same thing is with a lot of other protection magic. For instance, we have like magic armor or like magic against protections against spells or protection against elemental effects, things like that. And then we have like our healing magic, which is cure wounds, resurrection, and stuff like that, which are basically just touch. You just touch another player when you cast a spell.
Yeah, it's similar here. So initially when you said you can use all of the spells and you can use them as much as you want, I was like, holy hell, how do you balance that? And then you said 300 syllables, and I said, I get it. How short does that end up getting? Because you said at level 1 it's 300, and then there's a way to accelerate that. What does that turn down to as you level up?
Pretty much at max level, it is half reduced, and that is as much as it will ever be reduced. So once you are level 20, I think then that one spell would be 150.
It's whenever you get twice the rank you learn the spell, you are at 50% spell reduction.
Oh, that's
so if you
really cool.
If you learned it at 8th level, then once you get to 16th level, then it's at max reduction.
Yeah, well,
but all of your spells that you learn at level 1, you get max reduction at level 2.
Oh, hey, that's actually super clever. I like that.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
For anyone that's been in Amtgard for a while too, the original heal spell was around 150 syllables long. So, no, you're not going to cast the whole heal spell while we're sitting here on the...
Well, I mean, this is actually kind of harkening back to V6 and I think also V7 bards.
Yeah,
They had things similar. I don't remember the counts. I think it was 150 and 50 count or something like that for charm and some of the other stuff. So I kind of like that it's back to that, and it's your own cast, it's your flavor and things like that. So that's really cool to me, because you guys may actually be the better bridge than Amtgard is between like the combat LARPs and the lightest touch LARPs, because you are having I guess more character development to some degree. It seems like your role play is there more than ours, and so that's really interesting to me too.
I will say we have a lot of
event.
Sometimes we just have day events where you just go out and you're swinging swords at people. Like that's the way it is.
That's fair.
But then we have really great adventures and stuff. It's a lot of fun.
Also, go ahead.
I was just going to say one more thing about the magic in our game. Is one thing we did introduce to our game more somewhat recently in the past couple of years was we called it a timed casting method. But it's more of an RP representation of casting is what it's intended to be, where anything that has a number of syllables in order to cast, it has a base time that you need that are required to cast it if you don't want to say the spell aloud. For instance, if it took 300 syllables or whatever to cast Fireball, it might have a timed method of casting for 30 seconds, and you could represent that in a role-playing manner of, maybe you're going to draw symbols on the ground instead of casting the spell.
I have a cheat sheet.
And then cast it. So each spell has a number, based on the number of syllables, how long you should take to cast it.
I actually really like having the option, because immediately my thought was like I would have to learn how to wrap God through something to get Fireball off, but there's also an option to draw a sigil. I really like that.
I was going to say that's right up your alley, Lucas, where you pull a piece of paper out and begin drawing kanji on it, and at the end the spell goes off, something like that.
Yeah, I'm a fan.
Really cool.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Let's go.
That would all be perfect. I play essentially what is a paladin in our game, so. You bring out a holy symbol, and instead of casting a spell from a spell book and saying all the syllables that you already have written down, you can, make up a prayer with another person to heal them or something like
See,
that.
now I want to have
and I'm a bard, so performing.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Now I want to have. I'm right there with you, man. I want to have purity seals on my armor that I just take off and read and then.
I, as a bard, want to pull out a recorder and play a jaunty little tune that everyone hates, and then shove you.
Yeah, our bard class, I think, was one of the big, proponents of getting something like that available to our game.
Okay, so this may be way in the weeds in some ways, but what are all the classes? Because it sounds like there's maybe more than Amped Guard.
I don't know that there's more than Amped Guard, but let me see if I can remember all of them off the top of my head.
I happen to know them.
Oh yeah,
you want to go for it? Go for it.
It's Barbarian, Bard, Cavalier, Cleric, Druid, Fighter, Mage, Monk, Necromancer, Ranger, Rogue, and Warrior Mage. I only know because I just made the awards for Bellum last week. So I have like the list right here. I was like, I got you.
So a lot of these have similarities with Anthgard. I'm going to jump to the first one I noticed that didn't, and that was Cavalier.
That's
Paladin,
second edition.
an anti-paladin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, anti-paladin.
It's essentially would cover because you can role play it to either be whatever flavor.
Okay. It is our paladin for the game.
Yes.
Okay.
That's old school. That's second edition D&D right there.
It is. It is absolutely.
It's nice.
So you mentioned that you get to that people put a lot of effort into these classes and level them up and things like that. We in Amthgard we have a specific sash that we use to display. You're a paladin, so you have a dragon now. We just changed it. Or I'm a bard, so I have a blue sash. Warriors have a purple sash.
Yeah.
Don't look at me like that.
Warriors have purple.
So is everything indicated that way in your game as well, or is it just based on the abilities that you're using, and then you add your own flavor with armor and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. The second one you said, there's no representation specific to the game. The game rules how you have to represent your class. You can represent it however you see fit. Now, there are some abilities that classes have, and some belt favors you may see that are their personal spell buffs that might give away what the class they are.
That's all I was going to say.
I was going to say, so it's not necessarily an open information game, which is kind of interesting because a lot of Amthgard's doesn't or it's hard to make a new class for Amthgard because we use so many of the colors already for sashes. And my go-to thing is, why don't we just stop using sashes and do something? Because I don't feel like it would be that different in some ways, but there's a lot of pushback for that. So
yeah, and when he says open information game, what he means is I'm playing a bard and I walk up to somebody who has a gray sash. That means they're a monk. I need to move away from that person because I can't do shit to them.
I was going to say maybe it's different with your kind of magic and verbals. With us having a physical representation already in the kind of spells, maybe it plays out differently.
Yeah, I would also say that Darkon, where I see Amthgard has a lot of hard counter abilities to other classes. It's a very rock paper scissors style. Darkon is very soft counter per se, in the sense of there's no classes that are pretty much outright immune to another class's abilities.
See, I kind of like that a lot.
I think it also. Oh, yeah, go ahead. I was going to say, I think it also encourages us that if we can't just wear a colored sash and say, oh, I'm a bard or I'm a fighter. If we really want to sell that, we have to figure out how we're doing that ourselves.
Yes.
So as a bard, I'm going around wearing the big floppy hat, and singing my songs and performing. We have our barbarians that get their face paint on and they're roaring and screaming at folks. So I think folks also go to lengths to make those identifiers naturally, and I think that enhances their character along the way.
I want my hat back.
It's fancy hat time. I might also say something that might interest you guys as well, in that we have classes that have actual disguise abilities where they can disguise as other classes or things like that.
We have the I made that style hat too. That's really cool.
Fancy hat squad, let's go.
I don't have
all my fancy hats are upstairs.
They're not with me.
Here. I can't wear the headphones and the hat at the same time. It's a nightmare. Hold on, let me.
Your curly Q hat there, Fyxe. Is it all wool too?
It's so nice. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yes.
Oh, this
the
has
mask helmets. I love them.
Yeah.
Is this fancy hat?
Yeah, that's good.
Yes.
Perfect.
Qualifies.
Mine isn't fit
now
with
you
my
can
headset.
see what class I am.
I was going to ask, since you've got the helmet kind of thing on, do helmets actually mean something in your game?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We have a head legal game or head legal weapon.
okay.
Our flails. Yeah, so our flails and maces are head legal. It's the only chain weapon in our game, and it is legal from the top of the crown to the back of the neck. No face shots, not intentional. So it's just like an up and down motion, top of the noggin. It's just couch boom. It's really safe.
That's actually kind of interesting.
Nice.
Like, look, no one wants to get rocked. It's not going to hurt you, but like, you don't enjoy it.
Sure.
But it's safe.
Stinkfoot, you cannot make flails for Darkon.
Oh, he sure can.
Oh God, he made a set. They were new, and then they to help with longevity, he used a lot of cloth tape on it also inside the number. Oh my God, those things are bricks by the time we got done with them.
Legal, you know.
So,
as head weapons marshal at Darkon, I don't like it's legal.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kai.
Yeah, most of us don't either, but you know.
I was using them, so they were okay.
No.
They're safe. They're safe to hit your
friends.
Yeah, your frenemies.
So this was a question I was going to ask is there's not a hard rule on what a class has to look like, but you do need to present as that. Is there ever anybody that, goes around with a big two-handed sword and then, when you walk up to them, they're like, surprise, bitch, I'm a necromancer, and they do something like that? Or is
there's an entire
weapon
class
limitation.
that can disguise.
Okay. And yeah, you mentioned there was a disguise ability, so I thought that might subvert that a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, and so a lot of classes also can't use certain weapons as well, and vice versa. So you can again, you're kind of looking at somebody, you can get an idea of what type of class they are. Like you might, that might be a finger wiggler if they just have a sword or something like. They just have one-handed sword or something like that. If they're using we have like magic shields that are represented. They must be covered in yellow cloth, or they must be yellow. So only two classes can use that. Mages and warrior mages are wizards essentially.
Oh, that's really cool.
And then some classes again represented by just the other spells that they have.
You have an old school spell sword as one of your classes?
It's called Warrior Mage.
Warrior Mage.
And essentially it is spell sword. It's they can use most of the weapon classes in the game. They can't use shields other than their magic spell shield, which is generally a little like a buckler size. They can use two-handed swords, but they can also throw spells like magic missile and lightning bolt.
So is there like a cross-classing system as well, or is this all just one?
It's a single class. It's a class in the game. Yeah, there's no
some of them have the
cross-class
same
system.
spells.
Are you stuck in a class, or is it kind of like Amtgard where your character's
change.
whatever? Okay, cool.
So there's yes, you can change classes, and a lot of people play separate characters for different classes as well. So some players play it as the same character, and some people play it as completely different characters and personas.
Okay. Interesting.
There's some fair overlap with that in Amtgard as well. Regan, shout out.
Yeah, right.
Guy has like 30 different personas. They're all madness.
Respect.
Yeah. So armor in your game. This is something we've briefly mentioned. Is it a point system? How high do the points go? I see. I see Brady has quite a bit of armor behind him. Yep.
Yeah.
So how does this work in your game?
Oh, this is actually a pretty good representation here. So your plate is like your 4 points of armor. Your chain is 3. Your hide, which is like 10 ounce thickness, that would be 2 points of armor. And then if you have like a thinner, kind of like padded armor or like leather armor that's under than that, that's counts as 1 point. Now remember, we also have different types of armors that's kind of like magic armor that folks can have too. So like you could have bark skin, which could add an extra point to your armor to not exceed 2 points, for example. So there's interesting ways to go about that in the game.
I like that.
Yep.
So do your magic armors only augment existing things? Like in Amtgard, your magic armor is actually, think of it like a separate layer, different from what you may physically be wearing.
We have both. And actually, I think either Kai or Fyxe would probably be better to talk on this than I would.
Yeah, so I'll describe two different spells, for one from each side of that story. First, he mentioned Bark Skin, which is a druid ability, which is an armor augment essentially. However, if you're not wearing any armor, it still benefits you. What it does is essentially, any armor that you're wearing is increased by 1 armor class up to a maximum of armor class 2. So like your leather armor would be considered hide, or your AC1 is considered AC2. And also AC0, which is no armor, is considered AC1. So your skin would also be as if it was leather. So that would be kind of augment and beneficial. And then we also have mages. Like mages have a spell called Stone Skin, which is essentially a 1 hit and gone no matter what the hit is towards you, is prevented. So if it was a great sword that hit you, it would prevent the first hit that hit you. Or if it was a white or a club that hit you, it prevents that.
So it's a magic bubble that just pops on the first.
Yeah.
Essentially,
So
yeah.
Magic armor versus magic bubble. It's skin
Gotcha.
or bubble.
Cool. So your armor, how, I guess, generous is it? So like if I've got a chainmail hauberk and it goes down to like my elbow, and then does it still affect the rest of my arm, or is it purely covered, kind of like Amp Guard and stuff like that?
Protects what it covers.
Gotcha.
So protects what it covers, and then you can also if you wear different types of armor on the same location, we have rules for that. So say you're wearing chainmail on your shoulder, your bicep, and you're wearing a hide bracer, so AC2 on your forearm and AC3 on your upper arm. Anytime your upper arm would get hit, your entire arm is affected. So the whole entire arm is affected. So if you got hit twice in your upper arm, that's 2 points of damage. So your AC2, your forearm, would be destroyed on the second hit.
Okay. Gotcha.
Now, if you took a hit to your forearm after that, you would take the wound. But if you took a hit to your chainmail after that, it would be the third hit, and then that would be destroyed. If that makes sense.
So in Amp Guard, we just average those scores, but this sounds like maybe a better way of doing it.
Potentially.
I haven't thought over all of the ramifications of it, but I like it better than just this one's 2 or this one's 4 and this one's 2, so you have 2 points for the whole arm. I don't love that.
It's kind of what you get used to, right? Like,
yeah, fair.
If you're used to this system, then it's going to be fine. But if you're used to the Amp Guard system, it's going to take a second to kind of really get into it. But I overall like that because the mixing of armors becomes a little more useful in a way. That's interesting to me.
It becomes can be strategic on where you place your armor. Right? I often wear lower, like my forearms are usually a hide, like that. Just that example is like a hide bracer and then chainmail uppers.
Yeah.
Mostly because I like my chainmail is a torso, so it covers me.
Yeah.
So in your game, you mentioned you have arrows. I assume they work similar to how they do in like Amp Guard or Dagger here. Are headshots legal with your arrows? How are they constructed?
No.
Very similar construction.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say they're. I don't want to say safer might be the right word. I don't know if that's the right word.
It's probably the right word.
I wouldn't have said it.
I would say if you've seen arrows from Dagger here or Belagarth, the construction is very similar to theirs.
Gotcha.
Okay, yeah.
So yes, safer.
Yeah. But we don't allow face shots like they do.
Okay.
So face and head is off limits.
So the only thing is, like you had said earlier, just the flails, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. And spell balls. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, spell. Yeah, that makes sense. Actually.
So, real quick with the spell balls and stuff, is it just like the gamma balls or stuff like that we use, or is it something?
It's a little bit It's a little bit beefier. I think it's 4 to 6 inches.
It's the practice tennis balls.
You can use practice tennis balls.
Okay, yeah, I gotcha.
And then some make bigger, poofier couch things, but they not very small. I think it's 3 or 4 inches is our minimum diameter.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. So they're slightly bigger practice tennis balls. Okay.
I mean that makes them more noticeable when they're thrown because we already have people who will get hit by a small spell ball and not notice it.
It's probably the practice softballs that I'm thinking of, and not tennis. Tennis is probably a little smaller.
Yeah.
My apologies.
No, it's fine.
It's fine.
So, one thing that we touched on very, very early on was you had said that the area that you're in, that you and several groups around you had decided to play on the same rule system. Does this mean that Darkon is not as nationally cohesive as something like Amp Guard or Dagger Bell would be? Like you don't have a main governing body, you have more regional governing bodies. Is that correct?
So we kind of have a set of core rules that go around with our game, but we really like to encourage chapters to explore the game and make it their own. We do still use a shared credit system, and we have some rules where, say, like we have a sister chapter in Virginia, Silverdane, and they have had like different classes at one point in time. Like I think they had an alchemist class at one point in time, and we didn't have that. But we have a rule where they could come over to our game for a day and play any equal level class that they wanted to play, even though we didn't have that in our game. So that we still try to create like open paths for folks, but also create the opportunity for different areas to see what the needs of their player base are. So we try to let that happen.
I actually like this system a lot because it allows for more rapid experimentation. So there, and obviously every country, every group has its own kind of culture, and that's true within Amtgard as well. But it's much, it usually spans a couple of states where there will be a culture around awards or around, fighting styles and things like that. But this allows for much more of that in a much quicker format. Like you said, they had a whole new class that they invented just for their area. Obviously, it didn't apply everywhere, but I mean, if one of those classes catches on and works really well, I mean, there's a chance it can get picked up by everybody else. In Amtgard, that's pretty discouraged, I feel like.
So like it's kind of the monster class issue of like monster gets kind of relegated as a not exactly standard class because in the current rule book it's not. But that's kind of being looked at as a thing for V9 as well. So that'll be interesting.
I think Brady mentioned it. That I think is really important. Is our rule book is broken out into core rules and chapter rules essentially. So core rules would be like the amount of damage, like the damage and color of the weapons that are being swung, or the armor classes, which are pretty generalized across all classes, and then the character classes, which can be different based on chapter.
It occurs to me that there's a really sensible thing you could do with this as well. This is a pretty heated topic in Amtgard when it comes to armor, but we always say, people fighting in Texas are just not going to invest in armor, and so Warrior in Texas is not a class that's really worth playing because it centers around having armor.
It really does, yeah.
So do areas, do chapters in hotter areas maybe change their rules around armor and how that functions, or I guess could they? Let me just knock stuff over while we talk.
Yeah, well, I would. So there are character classes are extremely flexible in what you could do with them, and so I would see them perhaps utilizing a character class changes in order to augment that, right?
Yeah, I like that as an idea.
Like Warrior gets a bonus to their armor class, when wearing armor. Like instead of wearing an AC 1, it bumps their AC to 2 instead, something like that.
Yeah.
That makes a whole lot of sense. I kind of poked fun at Texas earlier, but it really is a problem because in Amtgard, if you're wanting to wear 6 points of armor and you're running around in plate in the middle of Texas where
you're gonna die
120 degrees in the shade, then sorry, Texas.
I mean, they know what they did. We're messing with them. No, but it just... Because for Amtgard, I know you guys cross game, but for our listeners who might not immediately recognize the difference, we have the one core rules of play which affects all of the classes, all of the armor, all of the magic, and then
in
local kingdoms. Yeah, local kingdoms have a corpora, but it's like, when do we have these events? How do we give these awards? How is it structured? And that's where the quote culture of every kingdom comes in, is in that smaller addendum. The rules of play are fixed.
Yeah, and your corpora cannot supersede the rules of play in any way.
Fair. Interesting.
So actually, that brings me to something I've been wanting to get at, because at least here we are all in a belt line, which is not the same as a fighting company. It's just, he is a knight and we are both squires who are both learning from him.
Kai's my sensei. I'm belted to Kai.
Perfect. Learning is a very very nice way of putting it.
Hey, my feels.
Just giving you a hard time. But how is your game? Sorry, let me finish the analogy I was going to make. He was belted for leadership in our game, and so we are, kind of learning that from him. Teflon is the current monarch of our kingdom. I'm the current senator of our kingdom. Yeah, moron. Cannot believe you did that. And so there are leadership roles that are defined for our kingdom. How does that work for you? Because it seems a little more loosely structured. So do you have a de facto monarch or king or queen or whatever?
So I think that the terms like monarch, king, and queen, we have those terms, but I don't think that they
Mean the same thing.
they don't have the same job essentially. Yeah. For instance, I think in Amcard, like monarch has an administrative job to the game.
Yes.
Whereas like king or queen in our game is purely a role play aspect. There's no administration that's required by that person.
So perhaps president would be a better representation of monarch or regent or something like that.
Yeah. Literally, yes. For us, because we're a 501c3, he acts as the president of our organization as well. We call it monarch because it sounds fun and cute, but he's really screwed.
We actually have a pretty interesting system when it comes to like knighthood and titles beyond that as well. So in Darkon, we don't have different belt lines for like fighting knights versus service knights versus leadership versus arts and sciences knights.
Yep.
It's all a knight is a knight is a knight in Darkon.
Godric will be so happy to hear this.
Yeah. And our knights are, from generally speaking, are very service-oriented knights. If you're going to be a knight in Darkon, you're going to be doing service. Like that is what it is. We have a lot of knights in the game that are fighting focused, and they do step up and they will help teach others how to do more sword fighting within the game. We have knights that are very more arts and craft focused.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think over the past few years, we've really delved into pushing players that want to enhance their abilities in those different categories, and become squires or knights within the game and learn more from those specific people. So in our culture, we have this understanding of who is really good at X thing. And I think that it helps that we are a more localized game versus a national game. I think that recognition can weed its way through much more easily.
Yeah.
But I do like Amcard's system where you can recognize, what someone did to get the title of knight, and that, if you have an interest in arts and sciences, like you should probably go talk to a serpent knight.
I think that's neat.
Now our knighting system, like I said, is it is more service oriented. We have a system we have a squire to knight system, and our system is very, I would say, open.
Mm-hmm.
And how you become a squire. It's relatively simple. A knight you ask a knight, or a knight asks you, or you just say, I want to be a squire, and you find a knight. And our knights also serve an administrative function to the game, which is our safety council. So anything that they're kind of like the right hand to the board of directors when it comes to safety. Player safety specifically. So any weapon safety, like if weapon safety construction things come into play, it's going to go to what we call our noble council, essentially a safety council.
See, it's bold of you to give knights a job after they've already gotten their belt, because for us, they go play SCA and then they didn't. If we did that, we would just have no weapon checkers, And
then some of our whites, some of our knights take the award and then they just don't play anymore. But yeah, they're not required to become part of the safety council, but their safety council is all knights.
Gotcha.
And that is one of the reasons that one of the things that is asked of players that are becoming knights is to be part of the council. As they squire, they would attend meetings of the safety council and understand how it operates and things like that. So it is it's a service oriented knighthood. After you become knight, you get the title of sir or dame or, those titles. And then we also have a title system that goes beyond that, all the way from sir. I think there is 7 titles total, all the way to king and archduke, which is the final title. Let me see if I can do it off the cuff. It goes sir, baron. I can't do it. Earl, is it Earl, Count, Duke, Prince, King, Archduke? I think that's all 5.
You missed Marquis, my dude.
I missed Marquis. I'm sorry. I just know where I sit.
Well, fair.
Flo had to Tebow when we hear our particular title. Amtgard has a similar thing. Knights are. It's weird for us because knights are a particular rank of distinction, but they're actually not the highest rank. Like I have an Archduke title in Amtgard, and that technically ranks higher than knight in terms of nobility.
And no one cares about it.
And no one cares about it.
No one gives a shit. There's not a ceremony for when I got my Archduke title. I don't get anything special in the game, but like knights get special tunic, special belt, spurs, nasty anime body pillow.
I would say it's similar. It's similar to that
as
in
an
our
example.
game.
I saw it. I kind of
Did you see the pillow?
So I sent it to my friend PG. I had to. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I would say it's something similar in Darkon, where knighthood is that ceremony, right? Knighthood is that moment you did all amazing stuff, so let's celebrate you. And then the titles after that are more somewhat role playing oriented. There's different ways in order to get those titles. The 3 ways are you can fight once a year for it in a special tournament that we hold twice a year.
Okay.
You can be nominated for it based on service throughout the year, once per year. Or, I'm sorry, I think it's once every other year you can do it based on service.
Oh, wow.
And then once every other year, you can be risen to the next title directly by the current king.
Yes, those are the 3 ways.
Interesting.
So fighting for it in the tournament is the only way to do it every year. Every other one is every other year, but they can coincide with each other. So for 1 year you could be directly raised by the king, and the next year you could get it for service, and then the year after that you could be raised by the king, and then the year after that you could be raised by service.
Could you do several in a year if you're really a go-getter? Like win the tournament, be raised by the king, bump up 2.
You cannot earn more than 1 title per year. 1 bump per year.
Oh shit! It just occurs to me these are laddered too, so it's like it's not okay. In Amtgard, the titles are given based on what you did to earn that specific thing. So
Gotcha.
Marquis, I think, is given for serving all of the offices. Is that right?
Interesting.
No.
Gotcha.
That's
Okay.
going to differ Kapora to Kapora.
Yeah.
Oh,
Because the
that's
titles
right.
are not standardized.
This is where the kingdom culture comes in because our titles are different based on.
Yeah, I have a marquee for my time serving as our prime minister, which is paperwork and things like that.
Okay.
But if I go to another kingdom, this might be a bad example, but I hope you understand what I'm getting at. If I go to another kingdom, marquee might mean something else. It might be given for something else or be a lesser title in some way.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So the titles in our game are laddered, except with one exception.
Okay.
Any player with that is at least a knight can become king we have a whole rule set around becoming king. It's possible for someone that is a sir to become king. And then the only way to get Archduke in our game is to be prince, then become king after being prince, serve your time as king, and then after you're done being king, you become Archduke.
It's like the lifetime award for you climb the ladder and then you got to king.
Nice.
Yeah. Something you said about the nobility titles in Amtgard, they are like identified with doing particular things. We do have a system like that in our game. It's not with knighthood, and it's accessible to all players. It's our orders that we give folks.
Okay.
So actually, Fyxe has been a huge part of helping us with that, as have some other folks in our game. And we actually got the idea inspired to us by Amtgard.
Really did. I'll admit it.
We looked at some of the different types of knights that they have, and it's a way that we have been able to point players in the direction of, hey, this person is a master of Raven. So that's a person that you go to if you want to learn about how to craft really cool things. Or this person is a master Order of the Dragon. That is someone with a great attitude, awesome sportsmanship. So we do have different things. And for the person that gets all those things, they're the great fighter, they're the well-respected in the realm, they're the great craftsman person. We have the Order of the Eagle, which is probably our most sought-after order to obtain, I'd say.
It's because it sounds the coolest.
Yeah, not a lot of them.
think there's 7.
Yeah, I'm one of 7.
Hey,
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You had mentioned tournaments. I don't know how familiar you are with tournament structure in Amtgard.
Very. I'm actually at 8 right now. No, I'm not at 8. I might get my 8th. We'll see. I have 7 Order Warriors, so yes, I'm on that grind.
Very nice.
nice.
That's awesome.
So is like we have the weapon masters, right? Where we have the 5 categories. I think that's more or less standard of weapon types that you fight in the tournament. Do you guys have that kind of thing too, or is it like an open weapon kind of deal, or is your tournament totally different and I'm way off base?
So there's not a codified way to run our tournaments, but there is a cultural way that we run our tournaments. I would say they're very similar to the way that Amtgard runs a lot of their tournaments, in that we have weapon categories that are somewhat similar. Single sword, sword and board, great weapon, Florentine. We have an open weapon category. And those can be, and it highly depends on who was running the tournament at the time, the volunteers at the time. We've run bracketed style tournaments, so single elimination bracketed style, and we've also adopted some of the Warlord sports style that Amtgard has done in the past.
That's actually the method that Firebrand ran at Bellum this year, was
So
Blam and Kai.
a lot of our
Warlord
bigger
style.
tournaments run in the WLS style. We adopted that especially because to me it makes running the tournament a lot easier. So I've run the tournaments in the past. It makes it running a lot easier. I hate doing bracketed with like 40 people. It sucks.
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
One quick thing I did want to mention is that we have 2 separate kinds of tournaments. There's a commoners tournament that all players of Darkon pretty much can participate, with the exception of nobles. Nobles are limited to the noble tournament, which is heavy armored combat.
So if you're a knight in the game, you can't participate in what is known as the commoners tournament, and vice versa.
The
That's
only
interesting.
exception would
Go
be the yearly
commoners.
event. The only exception would be at Bellum. Typically, we've allowed everyone to compete at the Firebrand tournament, commoners and nobles alike, but it's like the one yearly event. It's like the keep, I guess.
Yeah.
Dark equivalent.
Okay.
So first off, I'm going to address Flo here. Both of us now go by Your Grace.
Your Majesty.
Yeah, right. That's an interesting concept though, because you just have the one knighthood. So somebody could get knighted for being a fantastic service person. They handle all of the feasts and things like that, and they are just as excluded as the people who are knighted for maybe superior swordsmanship and also service. Yeah. That's interesting. I don't know.
That's great. And the tournaments are differently formatted completely between. The commoners tournament would be, and the tournament we run every year at Bellum, known as Firebrand tournament, would be very similar to the way Amtgard runs their tournaments. Whereas our knights tournament is very different. It's run generally in a rope ring, one-on-one combat. And it's done in armor, so you're allowed to wear armor up to armor class 4, which is our highest armor in the game. And there's 5 different weapon categories, and you're fighting in armor with those points. And also you're not required. It's not single elimination. What it is a randomized set of players fight for each category. So say I picked basically everybody that's going to be fighting in the tournament is all put on a token, put into a box. Sword and board comes up, you pick 2 tokens, and those players fight. Now, what happens is you get scored. You either win or you lose. You get that score, and you go on to the next category. You only fight one time. Any player that wins 3 at a minimum of 3 out of 5 categories is considered to be a winner of the tournament.
So you have multiple winners for the tournaments then?
We have multiple winners.
Interesting.
I'm not opposed.
Yeah, kind of. When you said roped off ring and armor, it kind of reminded me of Knight's Tale. You know how they did the fighting in the Knight's Tale.
Very much that vibe.
Yep. Yeah, and so what that does is any player that is attempting to fight to go up in title, so from Sir to Baron, essentially, all the way up the ladder. If they are considered a winner of the tournament, that is how they get promoted to the next title. So they don't have to win. They don't have to win the tournament.
It's actually kind of close to sumo, and it's kind of silly.
So you're not gating by only declaring one winner, only like a first, second, and third. It's depending on
Whoever
the number
could win 3.
Yeah.
You win 3 out of 5.
Something else to note I think is interesting is that, at least currently by the rules, the only way to get Cavalier in our game is to win a noble tournament. And commoners who win the commoners tournament are invited to come join us and see if they can compete in the noble tournament. And if they win there, they're allowed to play a Cavalier without being nobility.
Oh, that's super cool. I kind of really like that. Because it's not, I mean, it's still sort of locked, but it's not locked in a way that I feel is problematic.
You don't have to be a knight.
You can be an uplifted peasant, so to speak.
Yes. Yeah. A peasant with a sword.
A peasant with a really good sword.
That's something we didn't discuss when we were talking about classes. So you do have one that is, or at least
just
one that is restricted.
Yes.
Okay.
But again, it's not just limited because you can, through your own effort, win it.
Yeah, there are more paths to it than just the one, probably very expensive, very time-consuming path. I'm just speaking from what I've seen.
In Edward, yeah.
Yeah.
Love it.
We
It's a very fun and competitive path.
Yeah.
We unlock those two classes. Everyone can revel in them being weaker than all of the other classes now.
Yeah. It's a bit of a meme in our game where we have paladin and anti-paladin.
I've heard, and you just opened it up.
Yeah,
Yay.
you did, and they're not great classes anyway. So the argument from a lot of knights was like, I don't care if everyone has it. I don't even play that. So let everybody else not play it too.
Yeah. Do you guys have like a power creep kind of thing with your classes, or do they feel like they're 1-to-1 ratios, or?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we do have so power creep in my eyes is 10 years ago classes are more powerful than they used to be.
Sure.
That's what I think of power creep. Do we have like a quote unquote class imbalance? I would say there are some classes that are better suited for specific tasks. But I wouldn't say that there's a low representation of any one class.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely a representation of classes in our game that kind of going to get armor without having to wear armor. They get magic armor or buff armor without having to actually wear physical armor. I think there's a higher representation of those classes, and there's many reasons for that.
Yeah.
One big reason is you don't have to own armor, and the other is you don't have to wear armor.
Yeah.
So comfortable.
In the summer, it's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
With your tournaments, do you ever do tournaments where you're playing your class and it's a 1v1 thing, or is it just like a normal combat? Okay.
Let me bust out 300
classless.
syllables real quick. Please stand far away with that sword.
So
There's been adventures similar. There's been some adventures like that, but no tournament.
Okay.
I'm still play testing it. When I ran a tournament right before COVID, I tried to implement a spell slinger category into the commoners tournament because I decided to run one that year, and we're still tweaking of how to exactly incorporate that, but ended up being like, who can cast off the spell and throw a spell ball closer to the enemy? Like, we're still tuning it out, but we're trying.
That's
it seems like fun.
We have in the past run team tournaments, which is like 5-man teams.
Yeah.
That were class based. Okay. They were a lot of fun. And I think one thing I miss when I play something like Amtgard is some of the team play aspect.
Yeah.
I miss
especially
fighting
in
with my
more
company.
competitive setting.
That is something that I think Amtgard can do much better. And one of the things that was pointed out is like we don't typically balance teams around like fighting companies or things like that. We move people around, singular people around, instead of fighting with your friends. And I think that's something we could do quite a bit better by.
One thing I will say, going between Amtgard and Darkon a lot, because I can play each game once a weekend if I wanted to.
Yeah,
I do.
Is the I guess focus in Amtgard is more individual, and the focus in a game like Darkon is very country and group focused. And so there's a very big difference between the two, and I like both aspects in their own regard.
Yeah. No, the more I hear about Darkon, the more I'm like, I really kind of want to play it pretty badly, but
it's
I'm just
a ton of fun.
I think you'd like it, honestly. If you like battle games.
It's the thing that drew me into LARP, way back in the day. It's my home game. I love it.
Let me ask this. I actually wanted to ask equipment. Like if if one of our listeners wanted to come play next weekend or whenever the next event is, it sounds like there's a lot of similarity between Amtgard equipment and Darkon equipment. You mentioned Amtgard bats kind of have a function in Darkon as well. So I assume weapon construction is similar.
The only thing was Honestly, I think the only thing that would probably not pass would be flails, but everything that I've seen, I think the weapons are relatively, with the exception of some of the pole, like just because you need certain half padding for measurements in the map.
Some of the poles and arrows may not pass.
Fair enough.
But
If you were to
real
go
close.
with someone like Gorg,
Gorgs, we sell Gorg, yeah.
Gorg actually sells weapons that that are Darkon legal already.
I find myself plugging Gorg almost every week nowadays. But if you
Gorg's
haven't,
the best.
They're gonna have to start
haven't gone to
sponsoring
Gorg-
us. We got to do a moratorium. on
right?
it now.
If you,
I love that guy. I love that guy.
we love that guy.
Yeah, he comes in. We're really good friends with him. We hang out with him. He lives down in Florida, and
yeah,
he
he's
makes.
good people.
We're like friends, for real.
Yeah, I think he has a category on his website that is Darkon focused.
That's
Nice.
And we don't have a weight restriction on our weapons like Dagger Hero or
Vanguard.
Belagorth does. So there's no weight requirement in any of them. We do have the one restriction we do have is in any shield that is larger than 36 inches is required to have a core in it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 36 inches in any dimension.
That's
so
a
you're talking
tower.
like tower shields,
Okay.
things like that.
Yeah.
But any shield that has less,
I went
less
to
than
a
36
huge
inches.
round shield. I'm like,
Yeah.
A heater
Anything,
shield though makes more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, but any of the smaller, like your smaller, your medium shields and amp guard are going to be perfect.
So if someone, we have listeners coast to coast at this point now. If someone listening said, this sounds pretty cool, I want to check out Darkon. How would they go about doing that? Do you have a centralized website where they could find a group near them, or where would they go?
So darkon.org is our website, and we do have a button there that's find a chapter near you. Again, our chapters right now, they're more so centralized around Virginia and the Maryland, D.C. area. We do have a chapter that is out in Montana as well. But we also have some really great annual events that we get people that fly across the country to come visit. So we've had folks like from Hawaii coming out to our events in the past. But Bell Maternus, that happens in the spring. It's going to be, I think it's April 6th through April 10th, happening in Culpeper, Virginia at the Mountain Run Winery. So that's probably our biggest flagship event, I'd say.
Did we just get the scoop on the 2022 dates? All right.
You did.
Oh, all
heard it
right.
here first for some
All
reason.
right.
Someone's gonna need
All
to send me those dates. Like, I'm legit excited. I want to try this out.
I'm putting
real
it in
bad.
my phone now.
Come
Love
in.
to have you guys out.
Would love to have you.
I mean, we should start planning on stuff like that, honestly. Like,
Yeah.
I'm down. So I want to go back to the equipment stuff real quick, because in Amped Guard, we have a standard for garb that is bad. I'm just going to say it's
Comical?
bad. It's fucking awful.
Yeah, because
We
all your
have a
garb
higher
looks way
standard than
better.
that.
Yeah, I'm looking at everything in this background. I'm looking at Fyxe's garb. I'm looking at
Thank you.
Brady. This is either garb or just a really cool shirt, and the armor in the background, of course. Like, is this the standard?
We have a standard we enforce, and if you do not wear the minimum garb standards, you are relegated to single sword for the day. Thank you.
Oh, good. Good. So, where does that stand? Like,
Most of what I wear would put me at single sword. I feel like.
that's where you're most at home.
Now we
Anyone can handle it.
we give new players a grace period
Sure.
to get a kit together.
Of course.
So we don't punish new players coming out. We want folks to have a fun time. New players, their first event's free. They get some time to go ahead and get their kit together. And we also oftentimes have days where we bring out old garb to also hook up our new players, because we want them to just be able to jump in and have a good time.
So with your new players, because you have the countries and stuff, and that seems a very big aspect of Darkon. Do they? I guess what's the recruitment for a country, right? Like, is there like mercenary players, or do they like more or less everyone kind of files into a country or something?
Yeah. Go ahead, Fyxe. Sorry.
The only thing I was going to say regarding new players is that in our game, every single day event starts off with new player orientation, which is like a mandatory speech for your first 5 events, where we go over the rules and kind of like it's a cultural acceptance and go over things like that. And people don't immediately get shoehorned into any one country. You kind of like learn and make your friends there and kind of join the country where you make connections. People don't just funnel directly into one place.
Okay.
And
Find your place.
we've done a lot of things to facilitate new players that don't have a country. So one of the things that we did that a volunteer started was essentially make a it was a group. I forget what it was called. Maybe Brady.
The Realms Guard.
Realms Guard.
Realms Guard was designed around having new players be sort of the attaches to the king or the realm itself, right? They're out there.
They were the guards.
They're coming out to help the kingship or the throne, etc. Like promote. So there would be a veteran. There was like a veteran that was the kind of the leader of the Realms Guard, and they would take new players and show them the ropes, kind of like, hey, let's go over here and fight these guys, and that kind of stuff, like be heroic and things like that.
I actually love the hell out of that idea.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Because you're new, you don't know where you're supposed to be, so why not right up with the king?
Yeah.
Like that's cool as shit.
And then also like kind of if applicable, like, hey, if there's a new player that's aggressive, like an aggressive role player, they played other LARPs and things like that, hey, I want to go do this thing, they would like help them, you want to lead the group, go ahead, lead the group, let's go, hey, you have this great idea, let's go attack it. So that was one thing that was made. It was really cool. Another thing is we have one of the things that wasn't mentioned at all previously was we have a system in our game called guilds. Guilds are similar to countries, essentially.
Houses.
Amtgard houses, maybe.
That's what I was
houses
thinking,
would probably be similar. Yep. So it's just a group of players that all have the same, same, whatever you want to call it, career path as their role play.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier about different characters for different classes. Do they cross countries sometimes, or are they typically in the same country?
People.
Yeah, some people actually have characters in different countries and will come out to support their, a country as one character and then a different country as another character.
Interesting.
And all countries have their own recruitment process or what have you for just the same as like a fighting company would.
Do you guys have trials in the countries, kind of like Dag or Bell? I don't know how familiar you are with those.
Very familiar.
Yeah, so again, just like Dagger and Bell, it's very country specific. It would be country specific. Like, if you're talking about trials, that Dagger and Bellegarth have, they're very, brotherhood oriented, like within the itself. Like we've made this thing up.
It's really
like
cool.
Our company, No Quarter, has its own way of doing things as far as elevating members to different statuses.
The only trial I know of from Dag and Bell was like downing an entire horn of ale.
I think that was a knight's trial.
That's a knight's trial. That's a Dagger here night trial. A sword brothering specifically, I think.
Yeah, right.
Well, Xander went through an actual, what we would consider an actual trial, right?
I like that guy. I was at his knight's trial.
Xander?
Xander is universal.
I love him so much.
He is
Ravenous.
here.
Is he our Xander
and
comrade?
in
Hold up.
here.
Ravenous.
Hang on,
Xander.
I got him in Discord. Hang on.
Yeah. Hold up. We literally play every night together. Hold up.
That's freaking awesome.
It's my boo.
He might be yours now. Ask him where he came from.
Tell him Flo
We can
says
share.
hi.
We can share.
No, he's
but
good.
yeah, so if you saw Xander's knight's trial, that's a knight's trial at Dagger here.
Yeah. Okay.
It was really cool. I enjoyed that. And yes, we've seen those trials here at Darkon. It's really dependent on. Actually, we had one of our company members or unit members did something similar at Bellum. He did a fighting trial and then had his knighting ceremony the next day.
That's cool.
Yeah. So, how long is your game? Is it game on? Like, is it in kind of like all the time on kind of thing, or is it like very like here's a battle, here's another battle, go get drinks, that kind of thing, or is the nightlife different too? That's kind of a stacked question, but
so in many moons ago, so years ago, there was a lot of game on throughout, like all the time, like 24/7 style game on.
Mm-hmm.
And then more recently, the adventures I don't want to say have a set time, but it's been more in the evenings, more community driven rather than adventure time.
Interesting.
Which I've actually really liked more than like, because 10 years ago you would raid somebody's camp at 2 a.m. and steal their stuff.
Yeah.
It'd be super annoying.
I like sleep now, so that's probably
Yeah.
not for me anymore.
Yeah, I'm also not 16 anymore. So.
Yeah, I know, right?
And I really like the direction that Darkon's been taken in the last couple of years and been really community driven in the evenings for nightlife. It's been really cool.
I love the pit fights and bardic circles. Love that shit.
Yeah, so there's a lot of volunteers that take it upon themselves to make different events happen. Like Brady, for instance, making a bardic circle and having singing and dancing and awesome entertainment for everybody. And then some of our members taking it on themselves to create what we call pit fights, which is a lighted fighting arena in the middle, and with everybody surrounding them, kind of like gladiator
style.
And they're like they would bet actual we have actual currency in our game. It's called Darkon Gold, and they would actually
about that earlier.
We actually have coin. They're pretty cool.
They would bet against against players in the ring and things like that.
So you have like Darkon specific minted.
We have
physically
coin.
minted coins. It's
That's
so
awesome.
cool.
Do those transfer from like event to event, or are they specific to
Yeah.
that event?
So if you earn that coin at an event, you can take it to the next.
So
and
what about
use it?
Realm
It is
to Realm? Like you said, the Montana group. Can the Montana group bring their stuff?
If it's so that's going to be based on the team that's running.
Okay.
Darkon. It's going to be whether or not they accept it.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, and it might be at an exchange rate too. For instance, we have a group down south where like they would come up with we would take our gold to them, and they would accept our gold as a lesser form of currency. So like our gold would be quote unquote silver to them.
That's interesting. I like that a lot, actually.
I've seen
And there's some players get so generally when we rotate a king from one king to the next, Darkon sometimes mints coins of that king, and so you can kind of collect the different coins throughout the years.
It's the whole point to become royalty.
I want a
I want
Teflon
my
commemorative
coin.
token so bad.
There could be a flow commemorative. It could just be a beard all the way down the coin.
Yeah. King Kai?
Ooh.
Cogs on coins?
Yeah.
We already got cogs on coins.
I want more cogs on coins.
Oh, that's really cool.
That's super cool. I really
Are
like
these
that a lot.
are they like 3D printed or wood burned? I guess it
No, they're
depends on-
metal coins, my dude.
Holy
They're
shit.
minted.
They're cool.
How do you even get like
I know
We know people.
I know
Yeah,
that
God.
Solar and Nero used to do the same thing, where they had a minted coin system that you could use.
Yeah.
cool as shit?
It's cool. It's really cool.
I like that a lot. Is it all coins or is it paper money too? Or is
No,
it...
you can have a bank
there's also
account.
Okay.
you can paper money it too.
Gotcha.
And for large transactions, between like for country to country transactions, that's often how it works.
Interesting.
No. I want a giant bag of coins.
Yeah, we can't do that anymore. Too much real money.
Yeah.
But yeah, like for country to country transactions, like for instance, if you're hiring a bunch of players to fight with you in a war action, that might be, writing a check.
That's super
You had
cool.
mentioned before when you were talking about the hex map how you might hire another country to go out and take a hex for you, and I thought, what is the advantage in doing that? Money.
Money.
Yeah, I get it.
So
now.
you
This is
actually, your country actually earns currency based on the resources it produces throughout a season.
Gotcha.
cool. That makes sense.
And that
So that's
season
why you
is
would
done
build
in
a mine or
3
why
month
you would-
increments.
Short-term loss, long-term gain
3
sort
month
of stuff.
Interesting. I like
Yeah,
the
seasons-
idea of that too.
Four seasons a year.
Okay.
Yeah, I like this a lot.
I remember when we had 4 seasons here.
Now it's just summer, summer, summer. It's fucking cold summer.
I'll take
Global
summer.
warming.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I mean, you're absolutely right. Oh.
Tell them to stop melting the ice caps and we'll be fine.
Yeah, right. I mean, this is so. To me, this screams something that an Amtgarder could easily integrate themselves into. They could jump over at any point, and they can move back and forth. You said normal meetings are bi-weekly?
Bi-weekly.
Twice.
Every-
Every other
twice.
every other week.
Every other week.
So,
Yeah,
I mean, you could TikTok back and forth.
We actually have
That's
a
what
couple.
I do.
Yeah, I do it. Yeah, so we have a bunch of Amtgard parks in the local area that meet weekly. So it's really easy to go one to the other.
Rising Sun
Some
Station, every other
some
Sunday.
places
Nice.
meet Saturday, so you could feasibly go Saturday and Sunday.
Well,
So just on the off chance that someone in the area listening that does not know about Darkon,
like E,
are you listening? That wants to go try Darkon. What Amtgard groups are around you that you go to? How
Rising Sun Station or
Crystal
Blackthorn's
Grove.
not too far. Yes,
Crystal
essentially
Groves.
Crystal Groves is our kingdom. So like,
okay,
it's all pretty drivable. But the closest ones to where we fight would be Rising Sun Station and the Hagertown Park, Goldenvale, I think. No,
That's
what's their name? Is Windham?
Windhaven.
Windhaven. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that sounds right. Hagerstown is Windhaven. Rising Sun Station is Alexandria. Those are both within driving distance easily of Darkon days.
Interesting.
In our area. Sorry, I'm not responsible for the Silverdane Park.
Yeah, we actually have
That's fine.
since COVID restrictions have lessened since last year. We've actually had quite a few Amtgarders come out to our events.
good stuff.
Yeah.
We just actually this past weekend we had our first full Amtgard event since the start of COVID. And for us, us it was really cool. It was the highest turnout at an event we've had ever in the history of our kingdom, I think.
Wow. Everyone missed y'all.
Yeah, it was it was around 160 some odd people,
Something
I think.
close to that, yeah.
And then we had I think it was one of our most profitable events too.
Yes.
The stars kind of lined up. It was one of our best events ever post-COVID, so I'm hoping that hits all of the other LARPs as well because people want to come back and they want to get back into it.
We've noticed that.
Michael Hammer of God said this a long time ago, but this is a really good time to get your families back out, get people that have, used to come out and had quit for a long time and are now thinking about getting back into it.
Well, he also pointed out that there's a lot of people that are now that they're home, they're stuck listening to actual play podcasts and those, like, you can see the subscriber growth for things like Roll20 or
Dimension 20.
Yeah.
Critical Role and those things.
Critical Role.
Yeah.
And those are the prime people to reach out to say, hey, you think this is cool? Come do it for realsies.
Yeah. I will say right now is a strike the iron while it's hot for both players and LARP organizations. So from a LARP organization standpoint, we saw a good uptick in the number of players that came out. And I would also say just from a cultural change and attitude change, it's been really awesome since people have been coming back out this past, however many months. And then from a player standpoint, I think this is the prime time to be getting out there and playing in some of these LARPs. Specifically because I think that you can really get involved in kind of, I won't say quote unquote, some of the beginnings of new beginnings.
Yeah.
So for anybody willing to come out to Darkon, I will say if you're in this area, that we do have a vaccination requirement as well. So,
good point.
Mandatory vaccination.
Mandatory vaccinations.
Well, we'd all still be good to play, so that's good news.
Yeah.
Good. Smart.
I mean, this has all been really cool. I feel like especially like we've been trying to branch out to other games. So we did DAG and SCA, and now we're doing Darkon, and we're hoping to keep checking out new games. But I always feel like a vulture when these conversations come up because I'm like, ooh, fresh meat. Like I want to get inside of it and figure out how it works. And this is like every time I do these, I genuinely want to play them. I know. I actually subscribed to the local SCA group because I wanted to go do that. I'm going to check out. I've actually subscribed to the Darkon Wargaming Face group as well. And you have Darkon.org. Is there a more local presence, or is it just those two areas where we can kind of find you and coordinate and figure out when your events are?
So go ahead, Brady. This is your realm.
This is your expertise.
So as we have our different chapters, doing our specific Facebook pages are a great way to get connected with the community. Okay. So the Darkon Wargaming page you're on is more so just the place where we post up our event schedules. But you would want to check out the Darkon Crownlands Facebook page, and you can find a great link to that on the Darkon.org website.
Okay.
And you can also find links to all of our other chapters that we have there, and also lots of other cool things about our game, as well as our upcoming events, and it's all on there.
So we'll put links to all of that in the comments below, so people watching this on YouTube and listening on Spotify can find that. We're at the point in our show, I don't know if you've listened before, but we're at the point in our show where we usually...
Yeah, I don't want it to be.
I have to pee and I have to go home at some point. But
Fair.
Yeah, but we're at the point in our show where we usually try to get like a cool story or a funny story or a memorable moment. this is always the hardest question because there's usually a lot of stuff to go through in your mind. But is there anything that stands out to you as like a story you'd want our audience to hear? And you don't have to incriminate yourselves in this because sometimes it's like a story you would want our audience to hear. Don't get yourself
friend that I know.
Yeah, I was going to say, you don't have to incriminate yourself, but tell the story of
we were at the event smoking cigarettes and...
Now, I have actually a fun one. So I recently got knighted in the game for... I'm not really much of a fighter, but thank you. I'm a really big service guy. But the first time I saw knighting, I was just so amazed and wowed at just seeing the whole culture come together. It was at our big feast event that we had, and it was actually Fyxe that was getting knighted back at that time. So I was super inspired by what I saw then. I'm just like, oh man, I want to follow on this path. And I was actually very lucky because Fyxe was who knighted me. So
that's awesome.
It was super amazing and awesome.
It was an honor to be asked, Brady. You are just so sweet. Aww.
That's really
Don't make me cry in front of nerds.
Well, all right, that's all the time we got. Thank God now. Like I'd bail you out that easy. Do you have one as well? Do we want to share anything else, or is this a good spot to maybe wrap things up?
Go ahead, Fyxe.
Yeah, it's hard. It's the hardest easy question that you ever get.
because there's usually
asked.
so many things that you want to say, or like, or you're like, okay, hang on, how do I tell this without making myself get in trouble?
There's one that people, like, after this most recent event, everybody's asking me to tell, and I was drunk when it happened, so I don't remember the story that people are asking me to tell. That's another problem you might have.
Those are the best. Stories are meant to be alive.
Hey, Jay, buddy, I don't know what the fuck ropey blows means. That's lost to the ether. I'm the only one who's allowed to tell it, apparently, but I don't remember the damn thing.
Good night, folks.
Oh, is it that bad?
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Oh, okay, yeah, then we won't. It's good that I don't remember it, I guess.
All right. Hey,
Oh.
did you have something there?
No,
I
I'm
got
good.
nothing. I got nothing.
No, that's fine.
I got caught with feelings, and I have nothing to say. But
So I want to thank you so much for coming on. Just to do a quick recap, as we have on all of our other episodes, Darkon is a game that is very similar to Amtgard. It has a class structure that is similar to the way that the class structure that Amtgard works. For people that are currently playing Amtgard, the way that the different groups are structured would be more closely related to fighting companies or units if you were in Dagger Bell. Your park meetings are usually every other week, and you have larger meetings 6 times a year. Where with one big event that would be the equivalency to our Gathering of the Crowns.
Or Keep, maybe.
Yeah, or Keep, since Gathering of the Crowns doesn't get anyone there anymore. But your magic system would be very recognizable. This is charging spell balls, throwing spell balls. Your weapon tech is something that all of us are already going to be familiar with because we all buy from Gorg. Everyone should buy from Gorg.
Darkon is Amtgard if Amtgard tried to be more like D&D.
Yeah.
Oof. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I had a long explanation, and then there's that. So.
Kind of what it felt like.
I think Darkon is kind of the bridge between Daggerhear and Amtgard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Links are in the comments below if you're watching this on YouTube. They're in a weird spot if you listen on Spotify. I've learned they put it in a weird location, but look for them. They're somewhere. So links will be provided for everybody to check this out, find your local chapter. I'm going to hit this outro, yeah?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Bottle. Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on YouTube or Spotify to get notified about new episodes. And make sure to follow us on Facebook for announcements and more.